This argument, it came from the prophets and messengers that God sent to mankind. The Kalam Cosmological Argument proves that the universe began to exist. And it does that without any of the scientific evidence that's associated with the Big Bang. It shows that the universe couldn't have existed forever. And then it uses that to argue for the existence of God. Muslim scholars made it an essential part of their theology. Muslim theology is called Kalam, and every classical book of Kalam begins with this argument. That's why it's now called the Kalam Cosmological Argument. This is God's cosmos.
So this argument entered the Western philosophical tradition because of Kalam?
Yes. For centuries, Muslims were the only ones making this argument. One of the most famous Christian philosopher theologians is called Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, he said that you couldn't prove that the universe began to exist. He said that even though it's part of Christian faith to believe that the universe began to exist, he said you have to take it on faith. It can't be proven. Maimonides is his Jewish counterpart, probably the most influential Jewish philosopher theologian of all time, and he said the same.
So did anyone make this argument before the Muslims?
Yes. Probably the most famous person is a pre-Islamic Christian philosopher whose name is John Philoponus. But the Christian church condemned him as a heretic, so his ideas never caught on amongst the Christians. Before Philoponus, the ancient Greeks made a more basic form of this argument, but that's not where the argument came from. This argument, it came from the prophets and messengers that God sent to mankind.
Really?
Yes. The fact that God created the universe, that the universe began to exist after not having existed, it's a basic fact in the Quran. Just count the number of times the Quran says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala khalaqa, created the heavens and the earth. One of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names is Al-Khaliq, the creator. Another name is Al-Khallaq, the one who creates frequently, copiously, with great skill. This is a basic fact of Islam. Scholars call this ma'lumun min ad-dini bid-darura. That means you don't need to be a scholar to know it. Even children know it. Everybody knows that the universe began to exist. It didn't exist, and then, in quotation marks because there's no time before the creation of the universe, then it began to exist. It's transmitted en masse in huge numbers from generation to generation, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a Muslim theologian, his name is Ash-Shahrastani. He wrote about all the different kinds of religions and philosophies that were common in his time. He said that this belief that the universe began to exist, that God created the universe ex nihilo, out of nothing, isn't just a foundational tenet of Islamic belief, it's also a foundational tenet of Judaism and Christianity, and it remains that to this day. All the prophets and messengers taught that the universe began to exist. And the prophets and messengers, they all came with arguments. The Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's called Nabiyul Hujjah, the prophet of arguments. The Quran is full of his arguments. The Prophet Nuh alayhi salam showed people rationally that what he was bringing is true. That's why his people, they said to him, قَدْ جَادَلْتَنَا فَأَكْثَرْتَ جِدَالَنَا. You've debated with us, and you've debated with us much. The Prophet ﷺ made rational arguments. They're everywhere in the Quran. That's why it's perfectly reasonable to say that the universe began to exist. It's intuitive. And it's completely unreasonable, completely unintuitive to say that it didn't begin to exist. Let's make it really clear. Let's imagine we're two kids having an argument. Accuse me of something. Go ahead.
You stole my toy.
Did not.
Did too.
Did not.
Did too.
Did not.
Did too.
Did not.
Did too.
Did not infinity.
Did not infinity plus 1.
That's it. You know what you just did?
What?
You just made the Kalam Cosmological Argument.
How?
You just demonstrated that when I said infinity, it was not an infinity, it couldn't have been an infinity because you added 1 to it. And you can't add 1 to an infinity.
Why not? Why can't I add 1 to an infinite number?
When I said, did not infinity, I said, did not a number of times such that you can't get any bigger than that number. That's what I wanted to say.
But I did. I added 1 to infinity.
And when you did, you made an argument.
I did?
You said, Hamza, you got to your number by a process of addition. You added, you got there. If you got to it by a process of addition, then I, Muhammad, can add 1 to it as well. I can make it bigger. And when you do that, you limit it. You're saying it's not a number that you can't get any bigger than, but it's a limited number that you can get bigger than. And the reason why you can get bigger than it is because I got to it by a process of addition.
I added the did nots together, and when I add things together, I get a quantity. And a quantity of anything must be finite, because you can always add another quantity to it. So a quantity of time has to be finite as well. And that's why we know intuitively that the universe began to exist.
This is a philosophical argument. Philosophers call it the impossibility of reaching an actual infinite by a process of addition. It's a big name, but it's easy to get intuitively.
It means that when we look at the universe, we can see that the amount of time that has passed is a quantity. And you always make a quantity by adding 1 to it again and again and again, and you will never reach infinity. So the amount of time that has passed has to be finite, so the universe has to have begun to exist. It's really simple and intuitive.
So no matter how many times you add a did not, did to, you'll never reach an infinite quantity. And that means it's a contradiction in terms.
Yes, it's a contradiction in terms. That means it's a self-contradictory expression. If you say an infinite quantity of time has passed to get to the present moment, then infinite, by infinite you mean endless. You're saying that an endless quantity of time has elapsed. You're saying that an endless quantity of time has ended. Endless ended. It's a contradiction in terms.
So the prophets taught this simple, intuitive idea to why the universe began to exist. And they then used that as an argument for the existence of God.
Yes, it got really complicated. And I think I need another episode.
Let's do that.
If you like this episode, then check out my Why Islam is True course, in which I teach you 4 rational arguments that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself used to show that Islam is true. Learning on YouTube is great, but if you want to reach a learning goal, a learning destination, like how to make rational arguments, how to think critically as a Muslim, how to engage with modern science as a Muslim, then you need to follow a map that's been specifically designed to take you to your learning goal, step by step, through a series of carefully designed learning objectives and learning activities that take you to your final learning destination. That's how this course has been designed. This course shows you the what, the why, and the how. It shows you what we believe as Muslims. It shows you why those beliefs are based on evidence and 100% true based on Quranic rational arguments. And it shows you how to use those arguments to address common objections against Islam by atheists and others on topics such as evolution, the problem of evil, the age of Aisha, and much more. It consists of 20 modules, and it includes bi-weekly live sessions with me, pre-recorded lessons with 81 bite-sized videos, 247 application activities and real-world scenarios, a 24/7 community where you can ask a question and get it answered within 24 hours, and there's an option to buy a course textbook as well. Find out more at www.whyislamistrue.com/course and learn why Islamic seminaries are adopting this course as part of their curriculum to train the next generations of scholars. This course is actually the first and prerequisite course in the Basira classical curriculum in modern context, a 4-year curriculum consisting of 31 courses that will teach you everything that a Muslim needs to know about their deen and be ready for modern society. This 4-year Basira seminary curriculum is based entirely on the Muslim scholarly tradition, but it teaches you how to apply that tradition to the world in which we live, and it's taught completely in English. Why Islam is True is the first course in that 31 course curriculum. Check it out at www.whyislamistrue.com/course.